Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I'll keep the music on low volume here while I introduce both our very special guests today. This will be a panel discussion about ICAO's role in aviation safety investigations worldwide. Both Marc and Patrik have been on diplomatic missions to help various countries start up their accident investigations teams. I believe Patrik has been in Argentina and Kazakhstan, and Marc in Africa, Middle East, Central America, and others. Both have seen their fair share of accidents, either in business aviation or ones that may affect business aviation. And we will be sharing some of these experiences and insight with you. And now we'll begin. Make sure our screens are ready. And both you gentlemen, welcome to the Virtual Safety Summit 2020.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Perhaps, Patrik, we'll start with you. Could you give a very brief background on your experience as an air safety investigator, especially as pertaining to ICAO?
Well, it's a huge opportunity to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. Having the possibility to have been working with ICAO in this different types of, it's called a Technical Cooperation Bureau. It's the office that provides technical assistance to different states or countries. It's very interesting because you get to share the information in order to strengthen aviation safety in the world, depending on the type of role that you get to do, the type of mission that you get to do. In this specific case, I was able to in the case of Kazakhstan, to strengthen their office procedures and training of their staff, as the same in Argentina was to monitor the compliance of international regulations and standards. So you get to share all the knowledge that you have as an investigator, not only in the field, but also in both the economical part and the administrative part. And to be sure that the states comply with international requirements mandated by ICAO, according to the Annex 13 and the diverse documents that they use to do this. So it's a huge experience. I had a chance to make a course in Hong Kong also regarding how to write the final reports of accident investigations, and you get to share all this information and the realities of the different states regarding aviation, not only civil aviation, the passenger one, but the general aviation as well. And it's very positive because you learn a lot as well as you learn as an individual, as a professional.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Marc, how about yourself, sir?
Well, my experience is very similar. I don't work for ICAO, but so I'm not speaking on behalf of ICAO. I'm just recognized as an expert by ICAO Technical Cooperation Bureau, same as Patrik, basically. My background is both as a pilot, of course, to start with, but mostly doing investigations with the Transportation Safety Board of Canada. But I've also worked as a safety manager, both for the government as well as in the industry. So that puts me in a good position to do not only Annex 13, but also Annex 19. And I've been able to work with the Technical Cooperation Bureau on projects in Syria, for instance, doing similar to what Patrik did in Kazakhstan in terms of bringing up the competencies of the investigation authority of the state. And more recently, I was 6 months in Mexico City at the ICAO regional office, looking after their 24 member states in the Caribbean and Central America for Annex 13 mostly, although I did a little bit on Annex 19 as well, and also to help them out put together two regional accident investigation organizations, whereby several states will pool together their resources in order to make sure that they're all able to investigate major accidents if needs be.
Right. I'm sure both of you would agree that it is of vital importance to have an independent investigation authority that that's separate from the Civil Aviation Authority. We'll start with Patrik. Perhaps could you give some examples of why?
In having an independent accident investigation authority from the Civil Aviation Authority, you guarantee there's not going to be any conflict of interests, because sometimes the authority has, when they have no accident investigation board per se, they use people from the Civil Aviation Authority. And we have to remember that sometimes the Civil Aviation Authority is the one that grants the licenses, the certificates of the pilots, the certification of the company. So what happens if there's responsibility that comes during the investigation that comes from the side of the Civil Aviation Authority? Then you're going to have a conflict of interest there. In a practical example, should I put my findings in the final report? Will they be, the final report, will it be corrected by some way, or should the investigation be put under some sort of pressure, either political pressure or administrative pressure? And the final point that I saw sometimes is, should I get fired for the final report that I made as an investigator that came from the Civil Aviation Authority? So in that order, if you have a transparent or an independent civil accident investigation authority, you guarantee transparency also, because everybody gains from an investigation, from an accident investigation, from a safety investigation, because you establish recommendations that are going to improve and that are going to save lives. What do you want as a state? Do you want to save lives? Do you want to, have a good safety performance? Because all these reports also, they come into ICAO's database, especially the ones that are with big aircraft. And we don't have to forget that sometimes the general aviation, the private sector, is a very expensive one as well, because you have more freedom to fly. You don't have to comply with that many rules, so to say. So it's a little bit, it's better for everybody if your state or your region has an independent accident investigation office. Well-trained, well-funded, so you can guarantee the compliance of international standards regarding safety and accident investigation. Mm-hmm.
Right, I agree. Thank you. Let's keep this a casual three-way conversation. So, Marc, feel free to jump in if you have anything to add right there.
I mean, Patrik mentioned the major things. I mean, the Civil Aviation Authorities is just one of the many stakeholders, atop from the operators, the service providers, ATC, ANS, manufacturing and design. So the Civil Aviation Authorities that regulate or oversee or certify or provide licensing and certification, they're part of the aviation system, and therefore it's only normal that an organization independent from the Civil Aviation Authorities and the regulators would be investigating accidents and serious incidents like that. I mean, that's a given. However, it's now a requirement in Annex 13. It wasn't for a while, but it's been for a number of years now, and even now, some of the states in some of the areas that I was working in are still struggling to make the necessary changes in their legislation, bearing in mind that the independence for the investigation authority has to be enabled by primary aviation law. So it's some of the highest level in terms of the legal system of those states. And it does take time. And sometimes it may take 4, 5, 7 years before the appropriate legislation is enacted. So even though it's been a requirement for a few years, there are states that are still struggling to meet that requirement at the moment. And it's absolutely essential. I mean, if you're going to run investigations that are comprehensive and objective, you can't have, as investigator in charge, someone who's been basically sent by the Civil Aviation Authority on loan for a couple of months or years, and then going back to his masters. You know, that you can't have that. You can't expect someone to be able to criticize, if needs be, you know, some of the his employer, basically. So that's a big threat to the
Right.
how objective and comprehensive an investigation can be, and that's a natural requirement.
Yeah,
Right.
and you own the final report to the public, because it should be in a public release form, and an easy way to understand, because that's how you disseminate the information, the safety information to the companies, especially to the private owners or to the private companies that operate those aircraft that are not as regulated as the commercial aviation, as the transportation aviation, usually the private. So it's very important, like Marc said, to have a civil aviation law, for example, that defines the obligations and duties of the Accident Investigation Board. And that's shown in ICAO's USOAP
The audits.
Yeah, the audits. Thank you.
The audits.
Thank you,
As critical
yeah.
elements. There's quite a few critical
Yes.
elements in the audit list pertaining to Annex 13 to that effect. Yes, absolutely.
Yes, and that's how you show how a state is complying with international requirements. So sometimes they don't, sometimes they do, and then ICAO releases all this information publicly in their website, so you know which country complies or not. So that's for sure.
Right. We've got a side question here, actually, from the chairman of AsBAA. In an event of an accident, based on whose report will the insurance company make payments to the aircraft owner or operator?
I did some writing over there.
Right.
Sometimes I have to wait to the accident investigation, to the official report, but it can take some time. Usually, what I, in my experience, the company or the operator sends or the insurance company sends its own investigator or adjuster, they call it. I'm sorry, but they are not considered investigators in the AIG world of the United Nations. And they participate and they come with some conclusions, some types, but many times these conclusions that they come with from their investigations do not comply with the final, with the meaning of an accident investigation. What's the meaning? What's the final purpose of an investigation? To find the causes, establish safety recommendations to avoid of this accident happening again. So, but sometimes they're guided by commercial influences. You know, do I pay? Don't I pay? Do I pay? So sometimes you get into conflicts as well. Usually, we as investigators, as IICs, investigator in charge, we consider, and ICAO has this established in their Annex 13, some sort of obligations. They can participate maybe. Not in the whole investigation, but they can participate in part of the investigation with some data. But usually they have to wait to the final report. So that's why we have to have a very specialized personnel, investigators that can make the report within 12 months. Otherwise, yeah, it can take a lot of time.
Right.
I can just say a few things on that. Patrik is entirely right. Usually in the case of claims, the insurance companies or maybe even the legal advisors to the company will want to have as much information on the investigation, and therefore a lot of their actions may be based once the report is coming out. However, the safety investigations that are carried out under ICAO Annex 13, they're not there to portion blame or liability. They're just there to enhance safety. You know, so that has to be made clear, and therefore, and it's the same situation vis-a-vis, for instance, the judicial. In some states, you will have the Annex 13 safety investigation carried out in parallel with a criminal investigation or a coroner's inquest if there are any facilities, and there has to be ways, and the states there's recommendations for the states to make sure that between the investigation authority and any other authorities like the judiciary authorities, that they have clearly, defined boundaries between those. They can't, one cannot have primacy over the other, and yet they still have to collaborate, because the legal processes has to go as well. The claims have to be processed at some point. Any legal issues needs to be pursued as well. But it has to be separate and independent from the safety investigations. And the purpose of the Annex 13 investigations is not to apportion blame or liability, but basically to promote safety. So as an operator, for instance, if you happen to have an occurrence or an accident that's being investigated under Annex 13, my advice to you would be to make sure that you fully collaborate, of course, with the investigation authority. You will be part of the investigation team, as it was mentioned earlier this morning during some of the presentations. And the thing is that you should also already have good contact with your insurance company, as well as your legal advisors, and knowing in fact that even if you're part of the investigation team, the safety investigation team, there may be bits of information that you will be provided with that have to be kept in confidence within the investigation team, and you may not be in a position to share that with outside of the investigation team. So that's something that you have to keep in mind, is that especially in the initial phases of an investigation, there's a lot of media pressure, a lot of pressure for information to come out from the investigation team, and as investigator, you have to resist that, because until you have evidence, then you can't really share it.
Right.
Especially in aviation business, if something, somebody that is considered an important person dies in an accident in a private jet aircraft, that's very, very
tremendous pressure.
Yes, a lot of pressure, a lot from every sector, from
absolutely
press, from the business sector, from everybody.
Yeah, speaking of fatal accidents, we have a question here from Murray. This question could be addressed perhaps to the FAA and or the NTSB, both of whom kind of, well, the NTSB chairman did join us in day one, and we did have Jeff Gazzetti, the former FAA and NTSB investigator, with us earlier today. So we could reach out to them as well. But for now, for the both of you, it says here, do you feel that the recent Boeing 737 MAX report was objective enough and reached the right conclusions and lessons will have been learned by both Boeing and FAA and restore passenger confidence in those parties and the aircraft? So the question basically is, was the report objective enough?
The report is very technical, I think. I haven't read it, all of the report, but so far I think that the public, which is the ones that are going to be sitting on that aircraft, are not that confident of sitting back in that model of aircraft. That's my perception, at least.
I haven't read the report yet, nor have I read the congressional report on that. I've just read summaries on that, so I can't really reserve my judgment on the quality of the report and stuff like that. However, I fully understand that there's a strong need for concerns to be alleviated by the manufacturer and by the FAA as well. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that regard to regain the confidence. And I certainly wish them good luck.
Certainly this process will take time as well.
A lot of time, yes. A lot of time.
Yeah. We have a next question, anonymous question here for Marc. Where should one start to look at during an investigation relating to any safety management issues?
That's an interesting question. in speaking with a lot of my colleagues from investigation authorities throughout the world, it's because the SMS in itself has been, well, it's already been since 2009, so it's already 10 years. Time flies, doesn't it? But still, it's relatively a novel thing for many of the investigators in the investigation authorities. And I recall that, 10, 12 years ago, they were all asking, what is an SMS? How can we investigate an SMS? I would say that in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of advances made by most of the major investigation authorities throughout the world to really understand what's an SMS, because and how do we integrate that into our investigations? And by extension, not just the SMS of the operator or the service providers, but also the SMS that is implemented as part of the state safety program as well. So that's something that they need, and they're certainly well aware of their need to look at that. Now, in terms of the specifics to investigate an SMS, I mean, I don't think we have 3 days to discuss that. There's a lot of aspects of it. However, if you look at basically the audit elements, whether it's IOSA, whether it's AsBAA or ISBH, that relates to the organization or to the safety management system. Those requirements, for the audits, those audit elements would probably be a good place to start in terms of gauging, to start gauging the effectiveness of an SMS for an organization or for an operator or a service provider. So I would start looking at that in terms of how effective is the hazard identification, for instance. Do they carry out, actively carry out investigations into some of their events that are being reported? Do they have healthy reporting? Are the hazards readily transmitted to and risk assessed? And what is the outcome in terms of safety actions and how effective those safety actions are? So those are basically in a nutshell, the things that I would be looking for. And again, as I said, the audit checklists from that pertain to the org elements or the SMS elements of any of those industry standards would be a good place to start.
I have if I can help with this, I have a practical example of a company that used to fly here in Peru. In 12 months, they had around 8 to 9 serious incidents and 3 accidents with no fatalities, and they were operating with 737s, 300s, 400s, 500s. They had 3 destroyed aircraft, and they had their SMS program, and we just were watching the trends, and the trends told us, okay, they're going to have major accident at some point. And we informed this to Civil Aviation Authority. Nothing happened. They continue business as usual until they started having these accidents, with the aircraft completely destroyed. No fatalities, like I told you, but that showed us that sometimes even the supervision of the authorities in certain areas of the world are not as good as they should be. Yeah. Why? Because there are something happening there. Either they don't look at it, or they don't have trained personnel, or worse. So yeah, what we did, we told our boss, at that time was the Minister of Transportation, we told you so, because the scandal started to come up, the political pressure. What are you doing? The president calling the ministry. What are you doing? What happened here? And the minister was like, and he was trying to blame us. And we told him, no, we told you so. And we took out the documents where we wrote that things were going to happen because of the trending of the in this case, the SSP that comes feed us from the SMS. So it was amazing. And finally, the authority didn't do nothing, and the company went bankrupt. That's why they finish flying, not because of the authority of the Civil Aviation Authority that did something, but because they went bankrupt. So it was amazing. It was a case. I mean,
it's a pretty sad example. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, one of the issue that the civil aviation authorities, are trying to grapple with for some years is the SSP implementation, and it's difficult for them because traditionally civil aviation authorities are regulators, inspectors, enforcers. They're basically the police. They're not safety managers. And here we are, 2014, asking, states that don't have the experience to do that, quite frankly, to become by, let's say, 2022, have a fully implemented state safety program that is compliant with the requirements. It's a high step for anyone. It's a high step certainly for the civil aviation authorities. And even like 10 years ago, when I was talking with some of my colleagues in civil aviation authorities, I was letting them know that this is going to be a big step for you guys. You really need to get the proper people, the proper training, and because you can't just continue on doing just enforcement and policing and that's not going to work. You have to really become a safety and a risk manager. And that's something that you have to go and learn, and you have to implement, and you have to start as soon as possible because it's a long way ahead.
Right. So it's all about the attitude.
Yeah, and we have to also take into consideration that, for example, if a state doesn't comply with international requirements, ICAO has the obligation to put all that information into made it publicly or public knowledge and put it on their website. So, for example, any state can take, okay, so your state does not comply with the safety considerations of accident investigation or operations or licensing or whatever part of the civil aviation system. So what I can do is, I can put you in a blacklist and you won't be allowed to fly into my country, either your company or with your registration number from your country. So that's my right as an independent state as well also. So that can bring companies into bankruptcy and heavy money problems in that part. So it's a transparent world, communications are so big now that anybody knows anybody by these means, by this time now.
Would you say it's a good idea to become more voluntarily involved with safety authorities to try and develop some rapport, or would you say still to back off and let the authorities come to you?
It should be like an interchange of information, because there are some requirements from the authority to the operators. It doesn't matter if you're a commercial or private operator. You have to report always. But it's a benefit of both parts, because the more you report as a company, the more information the civil aviation has to handle, and that information helps the state to take decisions into the policy making of the civil aviation system in your state, in your country, or maybe in your region sometimes. So it's a win-win situation. Nobody is going to lose nothing unless they do something illegal.
Right. I guess that's also why it's important to have an independent investigation authority versus one that, where it could be under the umbrella of the civil aviation authority.
Always, yeah. But we have to remember the roles of each institution. One is complete reactive. The accident investigation one is reactive because the accident has to happen. And the Civil Aviation Authority has the preventive part with the SSP and the SMS handling of information. So it's very important to have the roles of both very clear.
I would just like to add something on that, because I think that, given that over the last 35 years, there's been some major improvements overall, continuous improvement in accident rate, in particular, fatal accident rate. So we have less and less fatal accidents. And some of the investigation authorities, they are reacting to that in a sense that, if we don't maintain the skills of our investigators, if we have less accident to investigate, how are we going to be, to maintain being effective? And again, keeping in mind that an accident and an incident is basically the same thing. The only difference is the outcome. And in fact, when I investigate an incident, well, I have an aircraft, I have all the flight data, I have people to speak to. So therefore, I have much more chance to find out, what are the contributors, all the factors, what are the hazards. I have a better chance of identifying those hazards. And what we're seeing more and more is, given that none of the annexes, and in particular Annex 13, they're the minimum standard. They're not limiting in any way. Investigation authorities don't have to restrict themselves to just the definition of an accident and a serious incident. They can investigate anything that has the potential to cause an accident. So that's enough for them to start investigating occurrences like that. And in my mind, even as an operator, I used to work as a safety manager for a major airline in Asia. I find that that's an advantage in a certain way. If there is an issue for which I have no traction as just a single operator, one of many customers for a manufacturer, for instance, let's say we have a reliability issue with something, and the manufacturer may not be responding as fast as I would like it to. If those incidents are investigated by the authority, the investigation authority will have much more traction, and therefore there will be a better chance for the appropriate safety actions to be taken. Certainly in the case of the investigation authorities, I think that as an operator or as a service provider, I would see them as allies. They're on the same page as I am. They want to improve safety. They're not there to police or, reprimand or, find anyone liable. They're just like me as a safety manager. They want to promote safety. They want to advance safety. They want to make sure that we don't have accidents. And therefore, I see them as allies. And as I said, if there's an issue that I think involves, let's say, a service provider, I would bring it to their attention and say, I think that that would be worthy of an investigation, and certainly would have no problem to contacting them in that way.
Right. Thank you for that insight, Marc. With a couple minutes left, I want to talk about one last item, is how we look at the value between an incident and an accident. Perhaps both of you could give some insight on that.
Please, I can give you the. Thank you. Well, it depends on the final result, and the final result usually you can establish in how much it costs. I mean, aviation is very expensive, very, very expensive. There are some requirements. There's in the mandate of the investigation to the states or to the authorities. It depends on the scope and the size of the investigation. It can be an accident that is not fatal, but it's still an accident under ICAO's definition. So it's going to start the whole processes of the investigation. Maybe there is an incident that is not that significant to safety, but it has happened many times in a certain period of times, like 8-7 times in a month. And maybe that triggers an official investigation as well. So it depends on the circumstances and the complexity of the investigation. But the results and the definitions are very clearly established in ICAO Annex 13.
Marc, I remember you mentioned on this topic as well, something about incidents being the best bang for buck. What do you mean by that?
I think I hinted at it a little bit earlier as well in one of my response, but I mean, the only difference between an accident and an incident is the outcome. In the case of the accident, you have loss of the aircraft, damage, injury, that sort of stuff. We don't want to go there, of course. Whereas in the case of an incident, well, you don't have injury or damage. So if you investigate an incident, to me, that's the best bang for the buck, because on top of that, there's no injury or damage, but you have people to talk to, you have an aircraft to examine, you have all the flight data that you want. You know, it's not buried somewhere in the deep sea or something like that. So to me, there's a lot of value in investigating incidents that maybe 20 years ago would not get you know, the attention that that they would have now. But I think it's really worthy. And from, like I said earlier, from an investigation authority perspective, you know, whether you investigate an incident or an accident, you know, it's basically the same. And you have to maintain those skills, you know, how to carry out interviews, how to you know, review data, how to you know, analyze the evidence that you have, and how can you really identify hazards. And you can do that as well from investigating an incident as you can do an accident. And therefore, there's a lot more potential for, you know, safety actions to be taken effectively and you know, improve aviation safety overall from incident investigations. And because bearing in mind that, you know, investigations, you identify hazards. So basically, and basically the core of a recommendation, a safety recommendation, which is normally part of the investigation report, is just a problem statement. So it's a hazard that, and then you communicate it to the SMS or the SSP, and then basically that's the entry point for their SMS process in terms of you know, assessing the risk associated with that, defining what are the safety actions that need to be implemented, and monitoring how effective those safety actions are there. So there's a continuum between, you know, the investigation authority and the state safety program. And investigations, basically the output is the hazard that are being identified as a result of the investigations. And that's how I can make sense of Annex 13 in relation to Annex 19, for instance. What's the role of the investigation authorities in relation to the state safety program? And when you bring it down to the level of the operators and service providers, what is the role of corporate safety investigators in relation to the company's safety management system and risk management you know, efforts? And that's basically what it is.
Right.
I hope that answered your questions.
Definitely. With a minute left, probably just a quick soundbite from both of you, from each of you. We are much more cost conscious now with COVID-19. The industry is under distress. Safety may be perceived as a cost item, right? It doesn't generate any revenues. What's your response to this? We'll start with Patrik first.
An accident is more expensive. I can assure you that.
Yeah,
a lot more expensive. I just have only that to say. I mean, if you want to save money, you don't have an accident. That's it.
Or if you think safety is expensive, go and try an accident. No, don't listen to me. The safety function within an organization is definitely a cost item on the budget, no doubt about it. And it certainly does not generate any revenue that I can think of in my experience. But the one thing that we forget is that it can provide an opportunity for savings. And there's different ways of doing that. I mean, of course, in the course of an internal investigation, you can come across, you know, opportunities to improve the effectiveness or the efficiency of your operation. I mean, that happen. One of the things that comes to my mind, though, in terms of the prime savings that can happen out of you know, a healthy SMS that carries out active investigations into incidents, is when it comes to getting insurance for your operation. One of the things that one of my former employer we were doing is we were sharing with our potential insurance underwriters very openly, telling them, well, these are the risks that we have in our operation and that we want you to underwrite, of course. They're definitely of concern for us, and they should be of concern for you. But we're going to tell you what we're doing with regard to those risks. How are we managing our risks? And they were surprised at first because we were pretty much the only ones that were as candid as we are in sharing, openly, what kept us awake at night. And but they saw that we knew what was keeping us awake at night. They knew and they could see that we were doing something about it, and therefore we gained their trust to the extent that they were not only happy to give us better premium, but also they were giving us bursary, additional money to help develop our SMS. So that's a pretty successful way of selling safety and ensuring that there's not only savings that are done, but also money coming in as well. That's the best example I can give.
Absolutely. Thank you once again, Marc and Patrik. On behalf of AsBAA, we appreciate your time for such an informative and inspiring discussion. We look forward to having you both back again soon, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe and healthy.
Yes, please.
Great, thank you. You too.
You take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Once again, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to all the speakers for kindly donating their time and for sharing their valuable experience with everyone over the last 2 days. A word of thanks as well to our members who make such events worthwhile. And for those who have yet to join our association, if you would like to help shape and grow the business and general aviation landscape in Asia and make new connections across the region, AsBAA is here to represent your interests while being the preeminent networking platform for Asian business, aviation, and general aviation. We look forward to welcoming you to AsBAA. Last but not least, we would like to take a moment to recognize our main sponsor, Bombardier Aviation. Bombardier Aviation is a repeat sponsor and longtime supporter of aviation safety in the Asia Pacific, including with AsBAA and its safety days in Singapore. The Asian Business Aviation Association greatly appreciates Bombardier Aviation's continuing support. Likewise, Bombardier is both proud and pleased to be associated with this initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes day 2 of AsBAA Virtual Safety Summit 2020. Thank you for your time and your commitment to aviation safety. And we hope this has been an educational and possibly even eye-opening safety summit for everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you next time.